It's day 4 of the Magnus Carlsen Chess Tour final, and I've got a real smash and grab game to show you. Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe, and do consider supporting us via PayPal or Patreon. So going into day 4, Hikaru Nakamura led by 2-1. Carlsen in the first game got a winning position, but I tell you what, Nakamura defended with such resourcefulness and made life very difficult for Carlsen, and the game ended in a draw. Then Nakamura took the pedal off the gas and allowed Carlsen to make an easy draw in game 2. And this is game 3. So Carlsen with the white pieces, you can see it's an absolutely standard gioco piano with this very regular pawn structure here for both sides. These kind of positions, well, both players have enormous experience in this with this setup. They've even done battle in this exact position previously. h6 prevents an awkward little pin with bishop g5, and then castles. Knight d2, the knight goes on its traditional journey over in this direction. a5, well, prevents b4, gives the bishop somewhere to drop back to potentially, but just gains a little bit of space on the queen side. Knight f1, there we go. Bishop e6. The light squared bishop is a strong piece. It's very, very similar to the Spanish, of course. So it's desirable for black to exchange this off. Certainly the exchange here will give black, well, a semi-open file at the very least. So therefore, bishop b5. And there could be a threat simply to damage the pawns and play d4. So that's why knight e7 was played. In any case, that knight wants to swing round to g6, where it supports the e5 pawn, and later on it might well hop into f4 as well. The only problem with knight e7 is that now, well, black's piece is just for a moment a little bit congested, and white has the chance to break with d4. So black has to exchange, and the bishop drops back to b6. Knight g3 looks very healthy for white, but black is able to hit back in this position with d5. Both players moving instantly, actually, over these first, well, 15 moves, basically. And here, of course, if there's an exchange, then black will get a very nice square for a minor piece here. So white has to push on. That's what white wants anyway. So the pawn on e5 acts as a kind of spearhead, claims space for white on the king side. And now here's the point of black's play. The knight throws itself onto this excellent square e4, offering a pawn. And if white takes, this did not happen by the way, then black has compensation here. You can see that black controls this square. You can play c5 to hit out at white's centre, and actually black has some initiative there, although Adiban did win a really nice game against Grandelius, so that's for another time. Anyway, knight e4, and this has been seen in several games. In fact, a game between Carlsen and Nakamura, indeed, this year. Carlsen played bishop e3 and the game ended in a draw, but Carlsen was ready with a new move, bishop d3. So now white really is threatening to take the knight because the bishop will end up on a really nice square. Therefore, black has to exchange. And this is a nice structure for white. So sometimes there's even potential to advance the pawn to g5 to break things open. Of course, not at the moment, but you never know. Does give the king an escape square. Pawn still on e5, claiming space. And look at those beautiful bishops. So, white is set up very nicely here for some kind of kingside play. So what's black got? Well, in the past we've seen queen d7 here. a4 from Nakamura is a new move. Now, he was continuing his policy of moving pretty quickly. I mean, as he has done throughout the whole match, actually. So a4 claims some space. And Carlsen played bishop c2 to attack the a pawn. Looks logical. Not only attacking the pawn, but you never know. Could be preparing queen d3 at some stage, although you've got to watch out for bishop f5. Now it seems to me that queen d7 is a pretty logical move here to protect the pawn and perhaps prepare to play bishop f5. But no, Nakamura just gave up this pawn. Carlsen took it. And now if black were to play bishop f5, you can see how that g-pawn can really come in handy, and then potentially g5 to break open the king side. So Nakamura played bishop g4. So he's obviously trying to put a little bit of pressure here. a4 from Carlsen. So he's making room for that bishop, and that is very nice. Queen d7 and bishop a3 pinning. Rook fe8. And here I thought this is really interesting. Carlsen had obviously prepared this, but he played it, once he got to this position, he played it instantly. When I say he prepared it over the previous couple of moves, he'd had a little think. He took the knight, exchanged off bishop for knight. It's a big decision. You don't give away your bishops lightly. But let's see why he wanted to do this. So queen takes, and now queen d3 is possible, and there's no bishop f5, so that's why the knight was knocked out. It's actually an important defender of the king side. So check and mate threatened, therefore g6. And now the important follow-up, knight h4, preventing bishop f5, but also teeing up for a sacrifice. And you never know, it might be combined with an e6 move or something like that. So this is already looking highly dangerous for black. Now you could play something like queen d7, but then you've got to face f3. White is definitely better there. But Hikaru played the absolute sharpest move. Queen b4, and this provokes a crisis. You can see that the bishop and the queen attack the d-pawn. And how does white defend that? You certainly can't play rook d1. You'd like to, but you can't play rook d1 because the bishop can take. So white has to keep going. Knight takes pawn. Now, obviously, taking the knight is absolutely hopeless here. And, well, for example, queen takes bishop, and white has won a pawn or two. So after knight g6, Nakamura instantly played queen d4. Of course, he prepared this. Now, the ending is going to be absolutely fine because there are, well, yeah, I mean, pieces on priests. I mean, white can duck out with a knight, but you don't want to play an endgame. Knight e7 check. So if that's taken, then it's mate. And queen h8. Okay, that's clear. So black is forced to play king f8. And now the king is, well, I'm not going to say the king is safe, but safe enough. I mean, if queen here, then you can play king takes, basically. So knight takes d5. So that sequence basically after queen b4 is more or less forced if white wants that. And here, well, this was an extraordinary moment in the game. Black should play rook takes pawn. And then knight takes b6. Remember, there was a threat here, so knight b6. And now the best that both sides have is to go in for this endgame, where white is a pawn up. But here, white's pawns aren't very good. In this case, the double pawns really don't help white. And the rook activates. Just in general, rook and bishop positions, bishop endgames are difficult to win, and rook endgames are difficult to win. Although black as a pawn down should hold that one. But incredibly, Nakamura took the pawn on f2, supported by the bishop. So the king has to step out of check. And then instantly played rook d8. Now, Carlsen had, of course, considered this and simply thought that white was winning. So when Nakamura played this, he got a real shock. And he was wondering whether he'd missed some kind of checkmate. As we'll see, it's actually very, very close here. But he felt he was winning. And so he invested almost 4 minutes in working out the details of this position. Very, very sensible. He didn't rush it. He had enough time in this case because the opening had gone very smoothly. And he worked out what to do. Rook f1. If the queen retreats, let's say queen d4, then white breaks through. Here and rook f1, not complicated at all. If rook takes knight, also no problem at all. You're just the exchange up here because the queen can't move away because of this. And after this, you can just come back and protect the bishop on one of these squares. So rook f1 just played. Rook takes pawn. Now, this is what Carlsen was worried about. This is the snap checkmate that suddenly appears, and Carlsen was very concerned about and made sure he'd calculated everything. He took the queen so that if there's a check, then the king ducks back here. If bishop takes f2, now that's once again a threat, but actually white is fine. After this, you check. And let's say king g7, knight f4 covers h5. White is fine. So Nakamura played rook takes knight. Very scary. You can understand how Carlsen got a bit worried when Nakamura went in for this so quickly. But in fact, Carlsen had worked out a very convincing way to proceed. Rook takes f7. Now, if king takes rook, this didn't happen. Then rook number 2 comes across. Check. King e7. Now, you've got to do it with checks because rook h5, mate is threatened, but white can do this. Queen h7. Here, queen takes h6. Rook e6. Queen f4. And then, well, here's a nice move. Still got to guard against this, and queen takes would allow a rook there, checks, but white can play bishop g6. Beautiful move, shutting out this rook. Obviously preventing rook h5 as well. If that's taken, let's have a quick look, then check. He's looking at both rooks, so if king here, you take that with check, and if the king goes the other way, then you can take that one with check, and white is winning. So you've got to get it absolutely right. But rook takes f7 is a winning move. Nakamura played a tricky one, king e8, so he's still threatening the queen and here. Now, rook f8 should actually transpose to those last variations, but, well, Carlsen wasn't messing around. He just played queen takes rook. And after rook takes queen, bishop g6. He's the exchange up. The bishop prevents rook h5, mate. So it's still in the air, but it's not just that white is ahead on material. In fact, black's king is in massive trouble in this position. King d8 gets out of a discovered, but then rook e1. White's threat is just to nudge the rook to the side and play rook e8. And black just doesn't have a good move here. Nakamura tried c6, but then rook takes b7, threatens the bishop, bishop c7, and now Carlsen finished effectively with rook e8 check, and then rook h8, and here Nakamura resigned. There really is no good move here. Threat, obviously, rook h7 check, winning the bishop. And if the king steps up, then just rook takes h6. Threatens a deadly discovered attack, and that rook is still looking at the bishop. So, yeah, it is absolutely hopeless. So, convincing victory by Carlsen. Excellent calculation. This time he had enough time left over to actually look at the details, so he could find the clear win. That's been his problem in a lot of games. After this, game 4, Carlsen just needed to draw, and he got it. Actually didn't have any problems in game 4 at all. So Carlsen won the set, and now it's 2 sets all. This is so close. Afterwards, Carlsen offered little insight. He said he felt he hasn't been able to get into his normal rhythm. I think getting into a rhythm when you're playing is especially important in rapid chess and blitz chess. He said, Hikaru's been moving extremely quickly, which has made it very difficult for him to settle. But today he felt this was the first day when he was kind of had everything under control, and it was a very convincing day for Carlsen, actually. He also said he thought that Nakamura made a mistake in basically playing a short draw in game 2. Carlsen had chances to win in game 1 but blew them, and obviously felt a bit unsettled, and he felt that Nakamura should have tried to press home that kind of initiative and play in game 2 instead of giving Carlsen a breather. Very interesting. Carlsen is so experienced in match psychology and has a very good feel for these kind of things. Anyway, the match is wide open. It's 2-2, and it's best of 7. So first to 4 sets wins. It's wide open. Thanks for watching.